Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mindset Podcast. Today we have on Sergio Tigera, and this is always a treat for us because we have another fellow podcaster on the mic today. So it's always a pleasure. Things just flow a little bit naturally. It's just a lot of fun. But before we learn a little bit more about you, Sergio, we usually like to put our guests through a little lightning round of some warm up questions. So
On the hot seat.
There's no hot seat here, man. I like the hot seat.
let's go. I love it. But this is one of my favorite questions, especially to people that have podcasts, because I ask myself this all the time, and honestly, I don't even know what I would say. But the first question is, who has been your favorite guest on your podcast?
Wow, man, that's a tough one because on Game Changers, we've been through over 85 episodes now for about a year and a half to 2 years. But I have to say, one of my favorite guests was Dale Murphy, who played for the Atlanta Braves, because I was a huge baseball fan growing up. As a kid, growing up here in Miami, I used to watch him on TV, on TBS, because that was the Atlanta Braves were the closest team to Miami anyway, right?
Yeah.
And he stayed with the team for a long time. That loyalty was incredible for me to see, and actually being able to meet him in person and then have him on the show was just fantastic. And that guy is a family man. He is, salt of the earth, really humble, although he had just a stellar career and should be in the Hall of Fame hopefully soon.
Mm-hmm.
He was absolutely one of my favorite guests and became a good friend. And we've kept in touch with him and his wife, Nancy. And he's actually going to be having a leadership conference, which involves baseball kind of analogies and translating that into leadership practices here coming in June in Atlanta. So that's going to be fantastic. So congratulations to him.
Very cool. And what was his name again?
Dale Murphy.
Dale Murphy.
You guys are too young to remember him. Older guys like me and anyone else listening will remember him from the Atlanta Braves, and he ended up his career in Philadelphia. But we've had so many amazing guests, both here from South Florida and around the country and around the world, really, who have been game changers in their industry and have done something really spectacular. So it's hard to choose.
Yeah. And we're going to get into now, Sergio, in a second about your podcast and what Game Changers means to you and what makes a game changer. These are all questions that we're going to tap into now in a second. But before we move on to the next warm-up question, I was doing our research that we always do before we have a guest on like yourself. We noticed that we have some guests that we kind of shared in common. Just off the top of my head, from what I remember, we've had Saifi Shuv, Mayor Bermudez from Doral, Peter Taunton, and Danny Rodriguez from Blue Mission. And those are all phenomenal. And I see Gabe smiling because those are all awesome. Phenomenal guests that we had. Every single one of those have been like spot on, like rock stars. Everybody loved their stories. So it's pretty cool, like Gabe said, having a fellow podcaster on like yourself, because we understand each other. We have a lot of the same guests in common. And I'm curious, out of those four, Sergio, that you remember, Saifi Shuv, Mayor Bermudez, Peter Town, and Danny Rodriguez, from that list, which one is the most memorable to you? Because they're all great people, by the way.
Right. They're all great. And so it's tough to choose. And it's like saying, who's your favorite kid, know?
Yep.
So I'll give you a little bit of background. So Saif, I've known him for a long time because, growing up, going to FIU and working here and now having the podcast here, we have a long history together. And so that was really kind of felt like home, so to speak, chatting with him. With Peter, it was really interesting because it was somebody that I had never met. And then we ended up almost going into business together on a project with him and another guest, which was to take some leaders over to Africa to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro and then stay a few nights in his resort, which is very near Mount Kilimanjaro. The tough part about that project was that it would require leaders to take off 2 weeks because it is quite an expedition. 7 days up the mountain and, up and down, and then 3 days there. So we were looking to launch that, but COVID and other things happened. So we put that on the side. And then Danny's got just such an incredible story with Blue Missions and what he's been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. So that was quite impressive.
Yeah.
And then who was the last one?
Mayor Bermudez, who actually
Mayor
Gabe and
Bermudez,
I, we just saw him this past Friday. He came to my real estate office of Valenzuela Group.
And Mayor Bermudez has been a dear friend for quite some time. And he was, when I first started off as an independent consultant doing leadership development, my first project was a 2-day leadership development conference in the city of Doral at one of the hotels there. And we invited a number of private and public leaders to attend. And he was so kind as to make the official kind of introduction to everyone. So, they all have a special place in my heart, and all play a different role and an important one here in South Florida. So tough to choose on that one.
And I love to hear that, because as you're telling that story, saying that you almost you went into business with Peter, and all these different opportunities that arise, and people ask me all the time, like, hey, like, I want to start a podcast, like, how has it been for you? And I always tell people that starting a podcast, although it hasn't necessarily paid us directly, financially, or but it's paid in so many other ways. And this, Sergio, me and Danny from Blue Missions have a for-profit business that we partnered together because of the opportunity that arose from having him on the podcast. And you almost went into business with Peter and different things. So it's just, there's so many opportunities, so many different avenues that podcasting can really take people. And I guess people just don't really see it that way sometimes, but I always encourage them just to put yourself out there. And it's you're another testament to that, and all that you're doing with Saif and having that background with him, and it's just so cool to see.
Well, let me tell you, podcasting is the most effective business card you can ever obtain.
Exactly.
And I know it does take a lot of work. And, you can start off very simply, right, with a microphone and a computer and start off. That's how I did. And, out of my home. And now we're in the studio, home here on campus at FIU. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's such an important and valuable way to add value to someone's life that you're meeting, that you want to meet and build a relationship with. By having them on your show, you immediately add value and you're getting to know them.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a great way to have a first meeting without it being a formal, meeting, right?
Yeah.
And so it is absolutely fantastic. And, and audio communication is the way of the future, and having this versatility that you can
100%.
listen to it on demand anywhere you want, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. All right, so let's move on to the next question. This one, Gabe picked it out. I know Gabe always likes the food questions for some reason.
I'm a foodie. I can't help it.
He's a foodie. He can't help it, so he's always bringing up the food questions. So this one is, if you could have one meal for the rest of your life, and only this one meal, what would it be?
Okay, so I'm gonna flip it back to you guys. What do you think? What restaurant do you think is my favorite restaurant? And you're gonna think it's obvious once you find out. There you go, Sergio. There you go.
Let's go,
Sergios. I should own the place.
You should.
And so my favorite meal is the palomilla steak with white rice and tostones.
Oh my!
I could eat that my entire life
Well,
without getting tired of it.
Well, Sergio, do you know Luis Gazatua?
Yep.
His brother owns Sergio.
Right.
Sergio's.
Yep. Yeah, I know the Kazitua family, and fantastic family, and
great people.
Doing some amazing things in a lot of different industries. And Sergio's is one of those restaurants that's like a staple here in South Florida that everyone needs to try out.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been born and raised here in Miami, and you probably have a Sergio's or like a La Careta, like every avenue, every part of Miami. But for some reason, I just can't get tired of it. I have it all the time, but I just can't get tired of it. But okay. Congratulations, you passed our warm-up round. You did better than most. Some people, have no idea how to even begin answering those questions, but 2 amazing answers. But let's get into the meat of things. As I was doing a little bit more research on you, Sergio, I learned that you spent early on in your career, you could probably tell us more exactly when this happened, but you lived 10 plus years in different countries. Is that correct?
That's right. So I graduated from FIU in 2001.
Okay.
Ages ago, millennia ago, and had my first job at Caterpillar Inc. And so I was sent over to the central part of Illinois, Peoria and Decatur, Illinois, which is not the most attractive places to be.
But it was cold.
But did my time there and was a blessing in disguise, because that I worked at a factory in Decatur, Illinois, where I was the only guy that spoke fluent Spanish. and they sold these trucks in Spain. It was a big market for them. So they said, hey, listen, we want you to go to Spain and ask, interview clients about what they want to see in their future trucks. And so I went over there for 2 weeks, and I told anybody and everyone that would listen that I wanted to go work in Europe, because that was my dream. And so by chance, there was an opening up, and I got that call. And so I went over to Geneva, Switzerland, which is where the European, Africa, Middle East headquarters are for Caterpillar. Wow. Okay. And I spent about 3 years there covering Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Then from there, I had an opportunity to go to Rome, and I was in Italy as an operations consultant. So it was basically, the dealers are independent companies. There was 2 of them. You cut Italy in half, one in the north, one in the south, and working on them on leadership practices and being a more effective and profitable dealer. Then from there, had a chance to go to Panama City, Panama, and I covered the Caribbean and Northern South America. It's about 19 countries in the Caribbean. I know it's a tough gig. It's a really tough life traveling in the Caribbean.
I bet it is. Oh man.
But and then finally kind of re-met my wife in Panama, because we went to school together at FIU.
Wow.
By fortune had it that one of my colleagues went to high school with her, and they came over with some friends, and we reconnected after 9 years. So I finally made it my way back to Miami, and that's when we got married and so forth. And then did my executive MBA. Actually went to come work at FIU in the College of Business for some time, and then went into consulting after that.
Interesting. So we can't move forward without asking you what your favorite country that you visited was.
Well, so that would depend. So Geneva, if I were with a family, because it's just beautiful, it's safe, it's clean, everything works almost too perfectly, but everything works, and it's a fantastic place to live, quality of life. But then if you're single, I would say Rome, because there, people are warmer. It's not so Germanic, but it's a lot of fun, but everything's kind of a mess.
Great food though. They make it up with the food.
Exactly. They make it up with the food and the wine and the good times. So now you pick.
Now, Sergio, we're in your years of traveling and having different gigs and kind of moving around, sometimes with a family, sometimes without, what were you ever scared? Did anything ever scare you of the future? I know for me personally, not knowing the future is a little scary sometimes, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. I'm sure you didn't know too much of what was in your future, but you were always bouncing around different countries. Were you ever scared? And if you were, how did you deal with that uncertainty that you had?
So I tend to embrace uncertainty. I kind of like it. I'm a bit of a risk taker, to a degree, right? But what scared me was the self-talk, was the voice in my head saying, hey, you kind of feel like an imposter here. Can you really do this? Because usually they choose the highest performers for international assignments. And I was a high performer, but every high performer, whether you're the president or you're starting off your own company now, or whatever you're doing, or you lead a company, there's always that voice in your head, that imposter saying, hey, when you're pushing the boundaries and you're going into the unknown and doing things that you've never done before, doubt tends to creep in. And that doubt is that voice in your head saying, hey, wait till they find out that you don't really know what you're doing here, or you don't know the language, or this or that, the other, because your subconscious is just trying to pull you back into where it's safe, where the ground where your familiarity. And it's scary. It's scary when you're out of your comfort zone. The first time I went to Illinois out of college, I lived at home with my parents all the way through college. So that was my first experience out of the house. And not only was I out of the house, I was in a completely new culture and new weather and new people, no family. It was a complete 180. And it was one of the toughest times of my life. But I figured if I got over that, then why can't I get over the next thing? And so it's this constant struggle between one voice in your head that pushes you to go past your perceived limits, and the other voice that's always trying to keep you safe and pulling you back. So you got to be able to balance and understand, is there any validity to what that voice is saying when they're trying to pull you back? Or is it just, there's lions out there, you're going to get eaten, come back into the cave kind of speak?
Yeah, I think I was even telling Anthony, I was texting with a buddy last week, and he was kind of going through something similar. I mean, he's been applying for a job, for a design job for some time, and he had been working some odd jobs as a freelancer, and he finally landed this big job that he had, been wanting for a full-time job, 9 to 5, the whole 9 yards. And he was like, dude, I don't know if I'm qualified for this. Like the way the team was speaking to me in the interview, like they love my portfolio, but I don't know if this was like, if I can like live up to the standards that they're really expecting. And I told them like, hey, like this is happening for a reason. I'm on board with you, Sergio. I think sometimes experience, or all the times really, experience is only the best teacher. And if people sometimes think that you're the man for the job, then they might see it before you even see it. And that's happened to me so many times where I think that I'm not qualified to be in a position that I'm in, but other mentors, leaders, even, brothers and sisters, people, they're like, no, you're more than enough for this. Like you can definitely deliver. And I think that's so important to have those types of people around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm sure this happened to you. And I want to ask you now, was that going through that adversity, whether it was in Illinois, whether it was in Geneva, wherever it was, like when did it hit you that you were like, okay, I am qualified for this. I am the one that these people want to go to be able to make this happen?
It doesn't happen in one swoop, or you
Yeah.
might get big bumps, right?
Mhm.
When you do succeed in a project or you do see the results coming through, it really gives you a big boost.
Yeah.
But we can't rely on outside influences. We can't count on those to build ourselves up. We got to build ourselves up in between, from the inside out. We can't wait for these external validation to come, because we may be waiting a long time. We might be waiting a long time because
Yeah.
it may never come. And so we're responsible for building up our own self-esteem, our own confidence, our own belief in our ability to cause really amazing things to happen. And that only happens when you do it daily. So Zig Ziglar had a famous quote, which was, we need motivation is, what was that he said? He said, motivation is like showering. It's recommended daily. And so it's the little things that you do every day to build yourself up that eventually steers the ship in the right direction and allows you to power through some of these difficult times.
Right.
One of the things I do as a coach is I developed an app called the Gamechangers Challenge. And the idea with the app is that it's designed to help create sustainable and long lasting and positive behavior change in your life. And how is it done? It's 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. So if I ask you at the end of the day today, and I ask your listeners, whenever you're listening to this, at the end of the day, I want you to look back at your day and say, okay, what are the three things? What are my three wins? What are the three things I'm proud about that went well today? Because if you do that every day for 30 days, that's 90 wins. All right. That's huge. A lot of times we don't remember what we did last week, what we did last month, what we did yesterday, for God's sakes. Sometimes you just don't remember because you do a lot. You know, you've done a lot, but what are you proud about? Because when you just think about it, you're building a new neural pathway. You're building new synapse connections by just thinking about it. And by thinking about it, you're recognizing it. And by recognizing it, you're giving it importance in your mind, which then attracts more of those thoughts. You're able to see more of those wins if you get used to it. You got to build the muscle, because we tend to focus on things that go wrong.
Right.
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 We can have 10 things go right today, but you get that one thing and it just erases everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's to your point, Sergio, it's just small victories. That's what it's about, the small victories. And one, my mom always says, how do you eat an elephant? 1 foot at a time. It's very overwhelming. We want to go to a certain level, but we got to go through the process of getting there, which contains small victories very often. And you say something often, Sergio, on your podcast, peak performance. And I think you might have just started talking about it just now. What is that, in your words? What is peak performance?
Yeah. So if you think about a time in your life where you're just firing on all cylinders, right? And you're almost like in the Matrix, where, time was just irrelevant. You were in the zone. As Stephen Kotler says, you're in that state of flow. You see a lot of extreme athletes in those states of flow that they're just, everything slows down for them.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in that situation where, kind of things slow down? And when we're trying to trigger those states, the first thing you got to do when we talk about the peak performance method, there's a course that I developed. The first thing I do with the students is have them graph out what their current state is and what's their desired state. Or, okay, what's that peak state? And we look at a number of different attributes that contribute to that. But the first thing you got to say is, okay, where am I today? What's my behavior like? What are my habits like? What are my attitudes like? What are my perceptions like? Why do I think the way I do? Right? And so once you have that, then you can map out, okay, this is where I know I can be. That's my peak state. Then what you need to do is you just have to start designing a path towards that. And a lot of what gets in our way, and by the way, you can get at that level. You can be there because you have been there before. You can say, oh man, back when I was, X years old, I did this and that, and I was just on fire. Right? I mean, that was like the highlight of my life. And I performed, I hit the Grand Slam. I spoke on stage and killed it. I delivered that presentation or that project due on time. I asked my wife to marry me, whatever it was, that you can get to that point in your life. So why aren't we always there? Well, there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way in our day-to-day, in our life, in our career, outside influences, the inside story, the inside chatter that gets in the way. And so when we talk about trying to get to a state of peak performance in a consistent way, there's a few things that you have to start thinking about. The first thing is your BS, right? Your belief system. And why do you believe what you believe? Well, a lot of it was, we weren't born with it. We're born with a blank slate, but it's ingrained in us usually by the age of 6. What our general beliefs are that are given to us by our parents, our coaches, our teachers, our friends, things that happen to us. And so by the time we're adults, we come with all these roadblocks and baggage and things that keep us from being at our best. Sometimes we're able to break through that, but then what happens? We tend to just go back to the average of what we expect from ourselves. What's good enough for us? That's not our best, but it's what's good enough.
Yeah.
Right. We tend to, we shoot par, so to speak, right?
Uh-huh.
If you're a golfer, and I'm sure if you're a golfer, you've had this happen, you hit this tremendous shot and you're just like, oh my God, I nailed it. I killed that one. What happens in the next drive? You usually, or the next shot, you usually shank it, because we tend to self-correct. If that was too good for us, subconsciously you're saying, well, that's not like me. I need to self-correct back to what my average is. And so we need to start identifying, okay, what are our belief systems? What are the beliefs that we have about ourselves? Because oftentimes we don't think about that. That's the first step, is really identifying those, figuring out the ones that are serving us well and the ones that are not serving us well, and then starting to get those out of the way. The other part is your self-image and your self-worth. How do you view yourself? What do you stand for? Right? Because if you don't stand for anything, you don't have a level of expectation for yourself and for those around you and your environment, then you can fall for anything, as they say. So an example of this is, let's say you are just a normal middle-class guy, working, you have a decent job or whatnot, but you find yourself in Monaco, right? The Grand Prix was this weekend. And you find yourself in Monaco amongst all these billionaires, and you're at a VIP party. And how do you feel? You feel a little out of place, perhaps, right? You feel like, oh boy, I don't belong here. Yeah. So you invert it, and then you're in San Francisco in the slums on the street, and you're walking down the street, and all these homeless people everywhere, and you feel like you don't belong there either, right? Like, so we always tend to find our comfort area, right? Our self-image. The idea is, if we rebound always back to our self-image, the level of our self-image, we got to raise the tide.
Yeah.
And how do you raise the tide? You got to start believing in yourself, affirmations. You got to start picking up different habits and different attitudes and so forth. And so when you start going through all these different things, and habits and attitudes, by the way, are the next step. And the attitudes are not either good or bad. It's just the way in which you lean, right? If you lean into something, that means you're excited about it. You can't wait. If you're leaning away from it, that means you're procrastinating. You're creatively avoiding doing something or having that conversation with someone.
Yeah.
That's how you can identify what attitudes you have. And then the habits just reinforce those. So there's a number of steps, right? But I would say for your listeners, the first thing you got to do is really identify your beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Get a rubber band, put it around your wrist. And throughout the day, if you think of something negative, snap yourself, because I want you to feel something to mark it and say, okay, that was a negative thought. Either, you know, you're on the palmetto and you're upset because somebody cut you off, or your girlfriend or your spouse said something that you didn't like, or whatever it is. Snap, 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 because you want to start noticing, right, what's happening. That's the first step.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I was trying to absorb everything that you're saying right now. And one of the things that I find with friends, classmates, coworkers, whatever it might be, the thing that people, at least in my eyes, has the most problem with, the biggest problem, is step 2 with that self-image. They have an identity crisis. They don't know what they want. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their passion is. And obviously these, I'm talking about, you know, people that are in between ages 16 to, 26, maybe. It could go from a wide range, but the people that I talk to around that age, that they're always bouncing from one thing to the next just because they want to find something that they're comfortable with, that they can identify with, but they just can't find it. They don't find their passion. What would you tell to those people, specifically to the younger people, just how to overcome that obstacle, that self-image? Because I think that's really, where the hardest part for a lot of people is finding what you identify with and what your self-image is portrayed to be.
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder these days than it was, I guess, when I was growing up, just because of social media, and that plays a huge role in influencing our self-image. We tend to devalue ourselves because we're comparing ourselves to what we see on Instagram and TikTok and et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. But when it comes to that, I would say give yourself the minimum effective dose, because if you get locked onto these social media sites, it's going to start tainting and blurring your vision for yourself. The other thing in terms of self-image, self-worth, and what you value and what you're good at is, I would say, follow the breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs are these clues that life leaves you. And if you think back to, let's say, the 2 or 3 best moments of your life, if you start thinking about what those would be, for me, when I really felt like I was on fire and I was just firing all cylinders, is I knew that when I was here at FIU, I was a peer advisor my sophomore and junior year. And so I was leading a group of freshmen. And when the freshmen would come in, we would gather in the, not the auditorium, but one of the locations here on campus. It'd be like 500 students there. And we would be up on stage and talking to them. And I absolutely loved being on stage. So I think I'm a closet rock star wannabe, because I love being on stage with a microphone and being able to positively influence their thoughts, their emotions, kind of be able to move that. And so that was one of my breadcrumbs. That's like a hint saying, hey, you love this. You can do this all day. The other thing was around coaching people and finding, bringing out the potential in individuals. When I was student body president here, and I had this one guy that worked for me, and I was able to do that. He was quiet. He was, introvert, kind of shy. And man, when he came out of his shell, it was like, it was a party. It was an opening party for him. And 15 years later, I'm sitting with him in a bar, having a drink, catching up. And he goes, man, I have to thank you, because you did that for me. And that changed my life.
Wow.
And so that was, those are 2 areas where when I was leaving Caterpillar, and I was looking for, okay, what's my calling? I looked back for the breadcrumbs and said, okay, these 2 things are my guides. These are my guides. So that's when I got into coaching, speaking, working with teams. I started my podcast, because I get to do that on a scale.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned just how you had the impact on somebody's life, and that kind of goes hand in hand with mentorship, and as a mentor, you have that kind of ability to really make a difference in someone's life. And as a mentee, your job is to search for someone who's been there, done that, someone who you admire, who can help you and guide you. What is your mindset when it comes to younger folks, people like Gabe and I, 20, 21, still in college or freshly out of college, who are looking to get close to someone really important and to learn their trade? Or how do you feel specifically about working for that person for free? for interning for them for free. In other words, not getting compensated monetarily, but getting compensated in maybe the rooms that you get introduced to because of that mentor, or the value that person brings. For example, right now I'm working, and I have been working for the past few years for free for different mentors who have not paid me monetarily, but have added tremendous value to my life. I just want to get your thoughts on working for free.
Listen, if you can do that, absolutely, because like you said, it's not the monetary gain, it's the gain of experience and network. And listen, you have the best option right there in front of you, which is have them on your podcast. When I started Game Changers, I started thinking about, okay, what's the premise of the show? And I said, who are the people that I want to associate with?
Yeah.
Well, I want to associate with game changers, people who have done something really significant in their field, have changed the game in their field, and have impacted the lives of thousands. Because I want to get their perspective on their journey, their struggles, successes, mindset, so we can inspire others, including myself, on my journey, on their journey. And so the great thing about a podcast is you can design it to be whatever you want. I always tell people, I don't think I qualify to be on my own show because, I haven't changed the game yet, so to speak, but I'm doing it little by little. But that's the kind of possibility you have with the podcast, is that you get to design the criteria of the people, and you target that to the people that you want to be around and associate with, because like they said, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Yeah.
And just having a conversation with them, building a relationship, all of a sudden elevates your game.
Yeah. I think that goes back to what we were just talking about having a podcast and the opportunities that, they present, and it being that business card, that network. And I think just in the past, we've only been doing this for 2.5 years, and we've been able to meet so many incredible people, so many mentors, even people that have come to our recent events that we've been able to mentor, which is really cool as well. And we feel unqualified to do that, but it's some people, they see that in us, and it's really cool. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that you had mentioned when you were explaining the peak performance method. And I believe it was the last step, which was the attitudes. And it was something that you said that you lean into. And I actually heard a quote recently that I've been really living by, because my mom used to, when I was growing up, she always used to complain that I was lazy. I never wanted to do my bed. I never wanted to pick up my toys. I never wanted to do any of that. And this quote is by Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He said, pay attention to what you're lazy at, or what you're lazy about, because that is not what you're necessarily interested in. Those are things that you don't necessarily want to do. And I think you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, because, growing up, every kid doesn't want to, make their bed or read a book or anything like that. And I think your laziness in a way progresses and evolves over time. But I've definitely been able to pay attention to that. There are certain, industries or topics that I don't necessarily care about or associate myself with. And I wanted to kind of get your take on that quote to see if that is something applicable to people that are listening to our podcast right now. Is that something that people can take away to apply to their life, to be like, hey, like maybe I don't like, math, and you still have to finish it, do it in school, graduate, but maybe don't go into that field, maybe find something else that you're more interested in. Is that something, coming from your background, from your expertise, from your clients and your courses, that is something that is applicable in that sense?
Absolutely, because knowing what you're not good at is probably just as important, if not more important, than what you're good at. You got to follow the breadcrumbs, but also watch where you find yourself resisting. When you're creatively avoiding and you're procrastinating, those are things that you can mark off or kind of put on the side and say, okay, that's definitely not what I want to do. And if you hate going to work every day, well, maybe you got to rethink what your career is. Right. And right now, in the last couple of years, the great pivot, so to speak, and the great resignation, as we've seen, I think a lot of people have been realizing that they've been in jobs and in roles that just don't serve them well. And the problem is, listen, if you're young, you're in your early 20s and your late teens, take advantage of the fact that you have time on your side. You have time to make mistakes, make all the mistakes that you can. I'm not saying, go down, kamikaze style, but take risks to kind of figure out where you want to go, because what happens, most people will graduate college, they get into a job that, for example, I mean, with me, Caterpillar had some of the boxes checked in the sense that it was a multinational corporation, opportunities for advancement, opportunities for international travel and living. And so that, that checked all the boxes. Fantastic. That's exactly the kind of company I want to work for. High moral standards, like very respectable company, all, globally. But the problem was I was a business marketing guy walking into one of the biggest engineering companies in the world, and talk about feeling out of place. Oh my God. Every day I would be saying, oh boy, I hope they don't figure out. I have no idea how an engine works. I've never learned.
Yeah.
I'm not the technical guy. That's my brother who is an engineer.
Yeah.
And so, that took a long time, but you know what? It never left me. The fact that the company grew on me, but I was never passionate about it. And that ate away at me for many years. Now I stayed because it had a tremendous, I was overseas. I was, international employee. That's all the great part that I loved about it. I was just never, honed in on the engineering and technical side of stuff. And so that was the piece that was missing for me. But what happens to a lot of people, they get into jobs and 10 years go by, and then you get a mortgage and you have kids and bills and all that stuff. And then you're stuck. And it's really hard to switch careers at that point to go find your passion. Although a lot of people have been doing that now recently with the pandemic, I think they've realized, hey, life is short. Do what you enjoy, because before you know it, we're all going to expire at some point. Yeah. And when you're in your deathbed, looking back, I know for me, the thing that I cannot live with is regret. I can't look back and say, oh man, I wish I would have started my podcast. I wish I would have, started my own company.
Yeah.
That will kill me, because then it's absolutely too late. I'd rather do it and regret something I have done than regret something I haven't done. And when you're young, you got the time on your side, because you can always recover. Your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, even your 60s. If you're 20 years old right now, you got 40 years ahead of you. You got, two more lifetimes ahead of you to recover. So try the things that scare you. Try the things that you think you're passionate about, because now more than ever, you can have a career in just about anything you want, just about anywhere.
And to use your own word, Sergio, expire, right? We don't know if tomorrow's the day we expire.
Exactly.
Or after this, you never know when your last day is. So make the most of it while you can. And to your point, what if we're blessed to get to the age of maybe 80, 90, 100 years old, and we look back at our lives, we have no regrets. So it's just going at it every single day, trying to do things that are uncomfortable. Like, Sergio, I feel like your entire life you've been uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations. Hence, you're the successful person that you are today. And I'm sure you can, that's a common attribute that all of our guests that we share have in common. They're always pushing their boundaries a little bit further and further. What do you think?
Yeah. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is what I tell 100%. People all the time. See, you have your comfort zone, which is very, it's relatively small. And then you have your next level, and then you get like imposter syndrome, which is like, oh shit, I'm way out of my league here. I always say have some positive pressure on that second level, and occasionally start pushing out to the third, but you got to maintain positive pressure. Like, you can't just be in your zone, in your comfort zone. You're not growing. You're just, you're actually, you're shrinking in a sense, right? Because time is going by, and as you get older, you have fewer opportunities, so to speak, right? And you're running out of time. So you always got to kind of have a little pressure and push, and it's something as simple as, look, try a new food, try a new language. Oh my God. When I speak Italian and French and Spanish and English, but when I was learning French and Italian, when I was over there, holy cow, talk about,
that's tough.
What they say in Spanish, complejo. Man, whenever I opened up my mouth, I kept saying, oh my God, you sound so stupid. Wow, you didn't say that right. Oh man, you're messing this up. And like, these are all the little chatters that are going on in your head. Doubt. When you're just trying to do it. But when you put yourself out there, you know what? Hey, people appreciate it. And then you gain a little confidence. Your sea level rises, so to speak. Your average rises because you're trying out some new stuff. You may not be perfect at it, but hey, you're doing it.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. But as we wrap up here, you reminded me of a story that I was just reading about. And it was a gentleman that he was doing kind of like a little research project for himself. And what he would do is he would go every time he would go to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or even Target to do his groceries, he would ask for a discount. Hey, can I have 10% off? And it kind of sounds like you want to cringe when you hear that. But and he said that this was one of the hardest things that he could have done because it was so uncomfortable. Like that's not something that you just ask for, without any reason. And even the
Right.
cashiers were like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you have a coupon? Like, what do you want?" He's like, "No, just can I have a discount?" And he was shocked to see how many people actually gave him 5-10% off of his groceries, off
Mhm.
his Starbucks coffee. And he's like, that showed me, one, to be uncomfortable with or comfortable with the uncomfortable, and being in those uncomfortable positions of asking those uncomfortable questions, and two, being okay with rejection, which I think is something that our generation really has a big problem with, because they have that instant gratification that they want everything now, they want it the way they want it, and they can't get it sometimes. And I
Yeah.
think that, to me, that was a huge lesson. And I haven't done it myself. I definitely want to try it out and go to Starbucks and grab a coffee and be like, "Hey, can I get a discount?" But I'll let you know. I'll let you guys know how that goes.
There's
But I think
a
that was a really cool experiment.
there's a great TED talk on that. It's a guy named Jia Jiang. So Jiang,
Okay.
and he has a TED talk that's about what I learned from 100 Days of Rejection. So
Yes, I think I've seen that one.
fantastic. You got
Yeah.
to see that. It's
Yes,
great.
it's amazing, and those are the types of things that I feel like people listening to our podcast are learning. They're trying to absorb that, and they want to be able to get comfortable with that. And at least for Anthony and I know that's something that we've been trying to get comfortable with in our short careers. And early on, we got a ton of no's, even from people that wanted to be on the podcast, and we would get no replies. Hey, not today, in 6 months. Those types of things kind of fuel you in a way, and
Yeah.
to us, it's just, one no is one step closer to a yes. So I
It's just
think
not
that's,
yet.
yeah,
It's not, no, it's not yet.
exactly. But Sergio, thank you so much. We could probably go on for a lot longer, but want to respect everyone's time. And I just want to thank you again for coming on and dropping all the knowledge that you have and all the experiences. I know we benefited from it. I have no doubt that the people listening are going to enjoy it as well. But before we go, where can our listeners find you? Where can they listen to your podcast? Where can they see your website, LinkedIn, Instagram? Where are you at?
So they can go to sergiotigera.com. Tigera, like tiger with an A at the end.
Nice.
Also on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Just look for Sergio Tigera and you can find me there. And also Gamechangers Live. We're on all the podcast platforms, including YouTube. And now, starting now in June, actually tomorrow, is our first episode on Island TV, which is on Comcast.
Nice.
Forgot what channel, but it's on Comcast, and it's also on Apple TV and Roku, Fire, and going out to 13 countries in the Caribbean.
So cool.
They're excited about that.
So cool. Yeah, congratulations about that. I know we were talking about that the other day when we saw each other at the summit. But that's huge,
Yeah.
man. We're so happy for you. We're in your corner
Thank you.
here at the Mindset Podcast, and hopefully this won't be the last time we connect and collaborate. There's a lot in the future for us.
Let's do it. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you.